Alrighty, this project, we're getting to the end of the semester basically, and this project is time to start really putting everything together into some kind of super coherent design that employs everything that we've been learning up to this point. You know, all our form, all our color, all our texture, all of our 2D concepts, our typography. It's all going to come together in this project, and it's a poster project for the Media Arts annual competition. And that's held every year, and they award cool awards to everybody, and it's open to college students in a variety of different categories. And one of the categories is poster design, and one of the goals for us is to design a poster for this Media Arts event that wins the poster category, that then gets to be the poster for the next year. How cool is that? So we're really going up against, you know, the rest of the community colleges in California, and competition's pretty stiff, but we've done some really nice work. So we'll see what happens. You know, we're going to just do our best and take a shot at it. Now the goal here, I've been talking about communication like since day one, and I've been talking about moving your eye around the page and activating space. So this is our real first chance to say, okay, I've got to grab someone's attention. I have to hold it long enough for them to get through the content, and then it has to be compelling enough that they do something at the end, the call to action, okay? So grab their attention, hold it long enough to absorb the content, and then get them to do something. In this case here, the intent is to get students to enter projects for the Media Arts competition. So, how do we do that, right? Okay, well, you're going to look at the demos and the other lectures and study them carefully, because it's not easy to design a poster. Everybody goes, oh, I love designing posters, it's so cool. But it's really easy to make a mess of a poster. And the reason why is because there's a lot of content, and you have a lot of things to say in a confined space, and the tendency is to just chunk everything down, fill the space up with content, and then there's no place for the eye to go, right? It just becomes this massive textual and textural kind of a mess. So when you're dealing with this, you've got to have something compelling that draws their attention, right? It's a poster, so you're walking by, you go, oh, what's that? And it draws you in, and then the information should all be there so you can read it, and then you should be able to do something. Now, remember that when you're walking by and you're calling someone's attention, everything doesn't have to be big, right? The only things that have to be big are one or two things. One, the imagery that is being used, and or something in the title or a word that is compelling, okay? So think about the fact that you have a very strong hook. Now, once you draw people in, the information that they're reading, they're probably going to be reading it only, you know, a foot and a half at the most away. So the type does not have to be big, as in like monstrously big. You can use the space effectively so that the information that you're trying to give them, first of all, can be scanned. So remember we talked about hierarchy back in the other project where you said, okay, what's the most important word? What's the next most important? What's the least important? Same kind of thing that we're doing here. There's going to be the most important thing, probably the title. Then there's going to be information to scan. In other words, they should be able to kind of go through and immediately see certain categories, for example, so that, you know, one is poster design, and one is motion graphics, and one is 3D animation. So these are like key points that people go, oh wow, I can do that. Oh wow, I can do that. So the idea is that you're trying to draw them closer and closer. You don't take them and hit them all at once, and you don't draw them in and hit them all at once when they get in small either. So you want to be able to grab them, then give them some cool pieces of information that are going to get them engaged. And then when they say, oh wow, 3D animation, that's what I want to do, then they go in and they can read the more detailed information. So even that information can be hierarchically designed, right? So think about what's most important, what's next most important, and then you know, what's the most important stuff after that, and then what's the least important. And then at the end, of course, we have a call to action, right? They have to do something like go to the website, you know, ask for the form, fill something out, whatever they have to do. And that information should be pretty dominant. In other words, you know, they should be able to see what they're trying to get to. They should be able to go, that's the category I want to enter, and then they ought to be able to find without any trouble what they have to do in order to make that happen. If they have to hunt for that call to action, you could lose them. And if that doesn't happen, then the whole point of the poster has been lost. So they got their interest, but they're not going to do anything. So that call to action needs to have some compelling thing about it. It needs to be an anomaly of some kind. It needs to stand out in some way. Okay, so whether that's in its proximity to the other information, or whether it's a different color, or if it's a different font, or whatever. Point is that call to action should be something that sticks out. Okay, so you've got essentially 4 or possibly 5 layers of information. You've got the headline, you've got the categories, you've got the category details, you have an entry deadline, which is always important, and you have the call to action, go to the website or whatever. And then there's always a bunch of disclaimer stuff too, and that stuff can even be smaller yet. That stuff can just that's the fine print essentially. So consider a hierarchy. It's extremely important. Okay, so you're going to want to check out the different lectures and demos about this project. Before I can, let me also talk about color, because you're going to be using color and you're going to be using imagery. And color, of course, we've only experienced color emotively and a little bit in that type project, and a very little bit in the logo project. This project, color is going to be a lot more important. So I want you to go back to the project on triads and tetrads and color chords, and I want you to review that color information, because you're going to want to select a color theme or a scheme or a palette, and you're going to want to apply that palette to this poster. You don't want to be designing colors, dragging a color out of here and dragging a color out of here, because not only do you have a lot of textual information, but you also are going to have a lot of places to put color, and it can get to be a mess really, really fast. So your trick is restraint. You almost have to think about not doing something rather than doing something. And again, in this project, because there are now so many variables, and as you've seen, everything gets more complex as we move through this semester. Every project builds on what you learned in the last project, and this is the whole kind of putting it all together thing. So it's extremely important to consider your structure, consider alignment, and we'll talk about that in a different lecture, and consider hierarchy of information. Consider islands of information. Every piece of information, say on a category, 3D animation, and then the little details underneath it. That's an island of information. And that island has relationships to the other islands, the other category islands. So you don't have to chunk it all together. You can have islands that relate to each other by similarity or by repetition. Okay, so you want to think about that in terms of clustering your information. What else do we need to think about in this project? Structure. Let's talk a little bit about structure. You want to think about the fact that alignment is a very important tool in organizing space. We have a lot of text now, right? And so suddenly text can become cluttered. If it's all centered, it starts to lack focus. If it's all flush left, it tends to look a little bit like a book. We can experiment with flush left and flush right. We can experiment with different kinds of alignment. So think about alignment, think about your islands of information, think about your text hierarchy, think about your color, think about your color palettes and how you use those palettes, where you use the color, and of course think about your call to action and having that stand out in some way. So a lot to think about now. So we have quite a bit more time to work on this project than we usually do. So you have a chance to really kind of work on it and refine it. So again, as you can imagine, with all the variables, your chances for exploration are limitless, and it's really up to you to explore as much as you can given the time constraints that you have. Now, this brings up one of the last important points of design in general, is that any project is never over. It's never done. You either run out of time or you run out of money. So in this particular case here, you have a certain deadline, and the money in this case is your available time, your resources. So you're going to basically spend as much time as you can refining these projects, and again, the possibilities are limitless. So don't be afraid to try things. If it's not working, throw it out. Save everything, save incrementally, save often. Okay? Have some fun.